You're live.
Good evening, everyone. The date is Wednesday, November 8th. It is 6:07, and we'll call to order this session of the Cleveland Community Police Commission's Police Training Committee. My name is John Adams. I'm the chair of the committee, and we will start the meeting with the call to order. Commissioner Benito?
Present.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Present.
He's on the phone. Commissioner Chura is excused, and I'm Commissioner Adams. A quorum of the committee has been met. And so what I would like to do with if that's okay with the one, I want to adopt the agenda, but I want to make an amendment to the agenda. We have Commissioners Wong and Commissioner or Co-Chair Ridgway, who's with us today, and also Co-Chair Rodriguez is here as well. And so what we wanted to do is, if it's okay with everyone, I want to move the report on the CIT training report, redundant, from the new business to up to the first item on the agenda to respect the schedule of the commissioners who would make time to join us today. Is that okay?
Sounds good to me.
With you, Commissioner Donaldson?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So the first item on the agenda will be the report on the CIT training that was attended by Co-Chair Ridgway and Commissioner Wong. And so they were able to attend the meeting. So take as much time as you need to kind of explain like what you did and sort of what you observed. And I'll just give you the floor. I'm going to start with you, Commissioner Wong.
So we want to thank again for the Adams Board and the and the police department for allowing Co-Chair Ridgway and I to attend the training. It was very extensive. It was almost for like 40 hours of straight training. There were about how many? 15, you think?
15 or 18.
15 or 18 officers.
Some of them were in and out being the supervisors.
Right. With us, and all but one, I think, was there voluntarily. That's the model that they use, is that a volunteer. The one that was not volunteer was a field training officer. So this is part of his training. I believe there was only one female officer and the rest were male. So my general thought was that I was very struck positively because I could sense from all the officers that they really wanted to be there. They really wanted to learn. And there was a desire to learn. I think, just going into, and I've never really done training like that in that way. The thing that I think can be improved was that these are officers that you can imagine are on the streets, like working, and for them to sit for a long time and have an extensive, some of the modules were better than others. In the sense that they were all very sincere. The people, many of them I think were volunteers, and they were all very sincere in giving the information, but some of it was structured. Some of the modules are better structured because they actively asked for engagement. So I could see some of them that, the officers were like fidgeting, and it was a lot of speaking at them rather than relating to them. I also heard some officers say that they really wanted to learn things that they can actually apply out in the field. So that's where I think some of the training, because a lot of it was anecdotal, it wasn't as helpful to them, right? And so we had the training there, and then we went to an off-site location that we, for behavioral health, I went to the clubhouse on Magnolia, which was very interesting. And we didn't, for whatever reason, we weren't allowed to go on the ride-alongs. I'm not sure what the thinking was for that. That would have been interesting for me. And then we went to offsite near where, and we did the actual scenario trainings. And there I noticed that a lot of the CIT, we went through like the CIT GPO, and that's like 25, 30 pages, but they just like went through it like that. I'm assuming the officers had learned a lot of that already, but it was a little bit of rush to me. And then the scenarios, I think they could have been better improved, because it was like you go in, you do a very complex scenario, there's real actors there, and then they give feedback. But I think it would have been better to constantly run the scenario like harder and harder, give feedback, and see the officer adapt. Because that's what they were asking for. Is like they were really, I mean, the one I was talking to, he was also an officer in the academy, and he was just desperate. He's like, if I can just learn one thing from this that I can give to my students, that would be very, very good. So I just think the pedagogy, I don't know if like this is the standard CIT training curriculum, but just for different learners in different types, you know, repetition might be good. Certain scenarios, the scenarios at the end were much more, I think, realistic than some of the ones they had during the main training. But I think the positive thing is that there were many officers that really wanted to learn. And then there was like, you know, a debrief. And I think the thing that concerns me there is I know they follow the Memphis model. And if I'm correct, the Memphis model wants a volunteer, right? They want to volunteer. But they said
It's a requirement, yeah.
right, it's a requirement. So I get that. However, they said that because of that requirement, even in Memphis, they're not even able to answer 50% of their crisis calls with CIT officers. So you have this problem here is that if you wait for people to volunteer, you're not going to get enough officers. You know, like my partner is like a firefighter paramedic. He's the only one trained in CIT in his entire department because he was the only one that volunteered. You know, so we have to think about what can we do to incentivize these officers, because they are very, because these officers that we were with, they knew that they face this all the time. And that's where the desire to learn is, that they knew that on a daily basis, they would face these things. And they wanted ways to improve, to resolve these situations. Because I think what I generally sense is that they understand that it takes a lot of knowledge and experience to deal with those situations. Right. So, and I know there's a, you know, RFP out for like care response, but I don't know how, like, I feel like we're just not meeting, like the two ends need to meet. Like if it's going to take a long time for that to adapt, and they have this gap in officers. And, you know, many of them just anecdotally expressed to me that I think there's just a lot of these calls that have some of this component, and they're really struggling to meet that. You know, I don't know. I talked to the chief and he said, well, I don't like to, you know, not to quote him, but like he basically said, we follow the Memphis model. But if you have a need, an actual material need in the community, but your model is saying, well, we don't train officers unless they want to, but there's a gap there, right? So I don't know how to fill that gap. I don't know if Jason can say, is there something in the Memphis model that says you can't mandate? Because people get mandated all the time, right? You get job training, and if seems like essential to their job, and these officers get it, but I'm not sure how about the other ones.
So I do know that according to the most recent numbers, and I'd have to go back and double check, but I think that from the most recent numbers, which were current up until I think like the end of October, we're at 36% of crisis calls being responded to by a CIT officer or an SCIT officer. That does not necessarily mean that the first on site were an SCIT officer, but it just means that at some point during the call, an SCIT officer was there. So they're at about 36%, 36%. I don't think that in terms of with the Memphis model and the requirement for a volunteer, there's nothing saying that you couldn't provide 40 hours of mental health training to every officer. That just, you couldn't call that
Specialized.
you just couldn't call that CIT training, because then that's not utilizing the model. So like I think that like, and they couldn't be called an SCIT officer, you know, but there's nothing that says that you couldn't get more officers longer mental health training. But, you know, I think the whole point of not just training, some of the point of having it be voluntary is that then also those officers then are also demonstrating a willingness to want to engage in working with that population. And obviously they all have to, but if you take out the voluntary piece of it and just say, we're just going to put every single officer, through this, that might increase some of the skills of the officers. But part of the point of having them, volunteer and go through the specialized training is so that then if they're called into into that situation, you know that they're going to be a good fit to enter that situation. And I think if you just trained everybody, then that dynamic changes a little bit.
And a few other things I remembered, because you can't, I mean, they talked about like, it's just very hard to prepare for every scenario, right? What I noticed, maybe because I'm a writer, there was a portion that was about how to de-escalate through language. And even the officers said like, no, that's not how you de-escalate. You can't say, like, one of it was like, you look like sad, or you like, and they're like, no, we can't say that because people don't like us telling them, and so I just said like, how about you ask them, are you sad, right? Just so I think the things you can control with like language, those models you can teach them. There are other, but it's not CIT, it's like, nonviolent communication, all these things could be, and they were very interested in that because they understood that speaking was, the language was something they can control and something that they can learn. The other things I remember is that with I believe they were most engaged on the gender and sexuality module. They had a lot of questions. I think, but there were opportunities, I think, to learn a little bit more. They had various levels of, and I think I think minority officers had more like questions. It was interesting that it was culturally that certain things were more talked about, maybe in certain. And the one that troubled me was I could sense a lot of defensiveness. I just folded arms, certain things were said, I won't repeat them, about the unhoused. They had, I think, because I think maybe
By the what?
By the officers, they assumed things about unhoused people.
Unhoused. Okay.
Yeah. So, and that could just be because they are proximate to, they come maybe from similar family, class, socioeconomic diet, but they were, they felt, I think a few of them felt it was a choice. And the other thing I remember is that there was a difficulty in understanding, what was it? It was like a mental, what was the difference where they had, it was mental and then
Extreme.
like the two,
SMI.
it was like something with perception versus something else.
Reality.
But like a perceptive,
Perspective taking.
perception, a problem, an illness in perception and an illness in,
STMI.
yeah, there was like all this other things. They thought that, because perception is about your senses, and it was about hallucinations versus perception.
Oh, sure.
So that took a
Hallucinations and delusions.
right, like seeing, like imagining something was a different thing than smelling, all those things. So they had, I think that was the difference. They had the person she was actually very good the first one. She had to explain it a few times. So I think, but those are just opportunities for learning, because they were very, when they didn't understand something, what was good is that they were willing to talk about it and they were very
That's really
curious. So that's generally why, I don't know,
So
Jan, your impression.
thank you. I just wanted to ask one more follow-up question. In terms of like, so I think there's more commissioners that, would may be interested. I mean, I think that, the getting the time off of work is like a challenge for a lot of us. But I just wanted to know, just as a commissioner, like what was the value of attending the training? I mean, you guys were there for like a whole week, every day. So all day with the officers. So, I mean, can you speak about that piece of it?
Well, I think that, it is a long time commitment, and it's just like, because I don't think even at work, you're sitting there for 40 hours, right? The whole time. So there was a few breaks and everything, but it was good to see the variety of officers, what brought them there, for their perspectives, and talk to them one-on-one. And because it seemed like a very relaxed environment, that they were able to speak openly because nobody was recording anything and everything. So, but it was just like, I think that like I don't think people, probably because we tend to do it with a group of people, we think they're all the same. They had various, very different backgrounds and very different approaches. Some came from military backgrounds, one guy has 3 degrees, like 2 master's degrees. So these are just things that are maybe were not expected. And I think it's valuable to interact with those officers. They even said themselves, a lot of this training I already know all this facts. Like there was an urgency to maybe have more advanced level like training. So yeah, I think that was like what was most valuable to me is just interact with them.
So just to add to this, there were like 4 levels of people at this. I guess if you look at us as civilians, 5 levels. But you had the co-responders, the social workers who were there that engaged in discussion and also some of the role playing. You had the officers who came, and the strength of that, I think, is that they came voluntarily. And when you look at that, you want to believe that they are very interested in this training and interested in working with this particular demographic. They weren't assigned, they came. And then you had the supervisors. These are the ones that can be called out when they face situations that they aren't able to handle, or there's nobody on the site at that time with SCIT training or CIT training. And then you had the top brass, so to speak. Lieutenant Mullins was there, and Sergeant Crespo were there. So you had these 4 different levels that brought all this amazing experience to the table. And again, you began to see the roles and responsibilities of each of these different groups in terms of delivering a complete program. I think that's, and I think because I sit in every police review board meeting, and you hear about the investigations that take place, and some of these investigations actually deal with people in this mental health realm. Now you begin to understand why officers respond the way they do in some instances. Sometimes it's a lack of training, but the goal is for those of us who might eventually have to assess some of these cases, is to understand what they might be experiencing when they come against this, and especially if they have no experience. I think 2 of the most important things I heard was that the Cleveland Police Department goal is to have a SCIT trained officer on every shift. So that's what they're working to do in every district and on every shift. And I think
Mullen said that they've actually now achieved that.
Well, I didn't hear that they had yet, but I know that that's what they said that was the goal. And maybe with this last class, they are. But I think in the meantime, in those areas where they didn't have that, the strength was this other tier of people who have been working in this area and were trained already. Now, every police officer gets CIT training as part of the academy training, but it's not the kind of training, that focused training that we saw, as that full week of training. The other thing is that they all come back and take additional 8 or 12 hours or something like that, 8 or 12 hours as part of a continuing education piece as well. So it isn't that that officers don't get this training. It's just that there are the officers who really want it, and they're the ones who would commit to that that week of training. I thought that the presenters overall were good, and I think part of that had to do with the fact that these presenters were practitioners. They were out there doing some work in their own area anyway, whether it was people from the Adams Board, psychiatrists, judge. These were people out here dealing with this community on a professional level. And so they were the ones, for the most part, doing the training. I think it was a diverse group of officers. There was only one female, but there were Latinos in that group. There was African Americans, they were white. And I think one of the things, I spent a lot of time talking one-on-one with the officers, and I had shared with them, I was real nervous when I came in because I didn't know what to expect. And not only what to expect, but their reception of civilians coming into their program. And they said that we were the only, what they call true civilians that had come in. They'd had the media in at one point. They had 2 or 3 other groups, but like truly outside civilians coming in and participating. We were among the first of those to do that. But I had an opportunity. I learned an awful lot from the presenters. I learned a lot from the role playing, but I learned more about officers and their thinking about this whole area from one-on-one discussions with them. I mean, one morning I basically interacted with 3 of them. And what was kind of interesting, for the most part, these were very young officers. I would say 20s, 30s, you may have had some early 40s. There were only 2 older ones, I think. One was the field, I guess he was the field supervisor with the white shirt. I can't think of his name right now. But most of them were young officers. And one of the things that was said was so impactful. This one officer said, because I was asking, how comfortable, some of them were interacting with a core group that may not have been part of their particular demographic. And this one officer said something. He said, we are a young group. We are different than people who may have been out here doing this work for a very, very long time. He said, I don't see the difference because I have never not been in an environment with African Americans before. He said, I played Little League in Collinwood, with African Americans. I went to school with African Americans. My friends are African Americans. So he didn't see the fact that a lot of the people that they may come in contact with may be African Americans. He didn't see that as unusual or unique in any way, And I think the other thing that was exciting, I know you missed the ride along, but I've done lots of ride-alongs before. So I do think it was, I think in the future, it would be great if they would incorporate that particular aspect of the training with anybody who comes in and take it. I take it, but I did them for 3 or 4 years. So I've always found that piece to be valuable.
The ride-alongs are the officers go with a behavioral health provider, not the other way around.
No, they also go to sites in the community. That's what's important about it. It isn't so much just for the officers. It's as important for the community to interact with the officers. To say, where are you from? Why did you choose this police force to work with? Do you have any experience working in urban environments before? How would you act? I mean, to me, the strength of that wasn't that they were riding along with a co-responder. It was that the community now has an opportunity to interact with the cadets, when they come out of training. And I think that's critical when one of our responsibilities is to somehow work to improve relations between our community and our police. Here's an opportunity now where the community has that opportunity to ask questions. Every cadet class used to come to Garden Valley, and sometimes we would have 100 people sitting in our gym because of the food pantry, and they have a chance to talk to them. Yeah. And it was just amazing how nervous each group was when they walked in, because they're in uniform and everything. Yeah. But then when they get a chance to interact and just talk as people, the nervousness disappears. The officers began to see what the expectations are from the community when they're on, in the field, and the community and the officers get to see what the community expects. But the community gets a chance to say to the officers, this is what we want to see when you come to us as well. Overall, I thought the experience was very interesting. I learned a lot. I did talk to Sergeant Crespo afterwards and say, so I think every one of and I talked to Carol, Dr. Ballard quite a bit too. And I said, I think this is a wonderful opportunity for all of our commissioners to take at some point. And they didn't make a commitment to that. I think they would go back and assess this experience, to see how it panned out. But I did get a chance to do a lot of one-on-one, and I thought that was great. The resources out here are phenomenal. The key is whether the officers know about those resources, to know to refer or to take people in. It was good to hear about St. Vincent and what they now provide compared to what they did provide. It was interesting to hear about Frontline, because that was one of the organizations we funded. And I spoke to the executive director who was on site, about Frontline. It was just a very interesting learning experience. And you're right that I'm not accustomed to sitting down 40 hours a week. Well, not quite, because that last day when we were doing role playing, we were on our feet a lot. But the first day I started nodding off at one point. So I learned I couldn't eat a big lunch. I needed a caffeine shot, before I go back. But we heard from everybody. We heard from people who represent people who might be dealing with mental health crises from VA. We heard from people who deal with unhoused. We heard from, a woman who was quite astute in the whole trans LGBTQ plus community, where that you're right, there was a lot of discussion there. But I just thought it was really good. I would still say that if there is ever an opportunity for more commissioners to take it, I think it may help us when it comes to looking at cases that may involve officers with, that have had to deal with the mentally ill at some point or another, to understand what their experiences might be going through that, while also understanding what their training is and whether they have actually applied that training to a real situation in the community, So that's my takeaway. I'm just glad I had the opportunity to go. And I would definitely say that if we have that opportunity for other commissioners to attend, yes, it's worth it, I think.
Well, thank both of you for attending. That was a lot of time, and thank you for the report back. I'm gonna, I guess, Commissioner Benito, then Commissioner Wan, and then I have a question from Latanya Goldsby, who's a part of the.
I have a question also.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, don't forget I'm here. But through the chair, do y'all know when the next training is? Has it been set?
I think it was done in December.
December, I think, and Mr. Van Leer has already stated.
December.
Is he going?
I don't know.
He's doing the one in December.
Right. I don't know if there are other spots.
I don't think it might be full.
Yeah, because I think they have to keep it
You
a
have to
certain
keep it a
size.
certain
I
size.
think it might be full, but I would. One thing.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Is that it? Okay.
No, that was it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, thank you guys both so much. It was really great to hear that perspective. I I would personally love to, be able to go to see what the officers, are. And also I just think it sounds great to get to spend 40 hours with a lot of different officers and getting to have that perspective. 40 out, I know for me, that's about 4 months worth of PTO. And, I just don't have that much PTO. And so, I think it would be great to have more, and I know right now it's like they want you to do the full 40 hours. So I don't know if that's something that we might be able we could try to come up with some funding to help offset so that people could take paid time off work so that they could go. Because I know I would love to, but it's just, I'm taking PTO to go to NACOL. I take PTO to go do other commission meetings. And so it's just too much for an entire week. So that would be, I guess, one thing, because I really think that commissioners would benefit from the experience. And so that would, I guess, be, luckily we have the chair of the Budget and Grants Committee at the table, but that might be my, I think that would be my suggestion, is seeing if we could come up with some funding to offset so that commissioners could take unpaid time from their jobs to attend, if that's a barrier. The other thing is, I just wanted to also point out that I know that there's a lot of members of MREC who would love to attend CIT. They've never had the same opportunity offered to them, and I think that's something that would be good for us to advocate for, because they are also, it is in their purview to advise and make recommendations on CIT, but they haven't had the same opportunity to attend. And I think they would probably experience some of the same barriers of, being able to take 40 hours off work. But if a couple were able to do it, I think that would be really good. And so I think that just was another thought that I had. The other thing that I just kind of wanted to, something that I've seen with a lot of officers and people in the community that are being responded to with mental illness and crisis, is that, the officers also can't create resources out of nowhere. And we're getting to the time of year where when you start calling 211 about rental assistance and a lot of other types of assistance.
I'm sorry. I'm
That's okay.
sorry, because 211 is the number they advise us not to use. 988, what was it?
There are two different resources.
Yeah, but
Nine-
but more and more when it comes to the mental health resources and stuff, it's not 211.
I'm talking about something different. I'm talking
Okay.
about when you need rental assistance, if you need help with
Okay.
housing, like you call 988 when you're experiencing a mental health crisis, you call 211. If you-
Emergency resources.
Yes. But you know, when we're at the time of year where everybody's running out of funding, you know, you know, and I think that one thing that gets hard is that we are constantly sending officers in to respond to situations where, you know, it's hard to connect people to resources if those resources don't exist. And so I think that is a barrier that officers are constantly, you know, running into. And something that I experience in my job a lot is, you know, there's just not enough to address, you know, the barriers that we're seeing. So.
Okay, so yeah, and I agree with that because that's what they were asking. So at the one site, the clubhouse told them you can't just bring someone here. That's not, you know, so it's not because they don't. And I've helped a few people that were unhoused. It was very difficult for me, even knowing people from the we have a community member that has pointed out that last year, the CDP officers received 4 hours of training about homelessness. So that was, I'm assuming that was separate training somewhere. I would like to ask, and I know from the behavioral health group, because what I'm seeing is that there are, you know, there is at least this training elevates their understanding. Obviously, it's a lot of knowledge, but are the resources being used correctly? Like, I feel like either we have to go, and I know, like, how many years of education did you need to become a social worker? You can't expect an officer to learn that in 40 hours, especially when it's not. I mean, I think there needs to be continual training, whether it's specialized or regular, because they only get, what, 4 hours a year?
But officers who go through, they receive, I think everybody receives 4 hours in academy, and then officers, 8 hours in academy, and then all the officers receive, right now they're receiving 4 hours. The CIT officers receive 4 hours of additional training every year.
Okay. So I guess my concern is, I mean, we do have, this is not like any scenario, I think, with extra stresses socioeconomically, lots of people losing their homes, you're going to have a lot more of like that mental health, and everything is going to be interwoven into so many calls, right? It's going to be very composite and very complex. And my worry is, because I came out of a church at someone's funeral and I saw a Black man surrounded by 10 officers, and it was a potential domestic issue, but also he was saying to the officers to shoot him. So, you know, do we have, and that's the thing, is that I understand we're arguing between these models and everything, like, and there are places that have, even like in Austin, it's still at like, what, 30%, 20%, even with the code. But do we need multiple solutions? And what is within our purview, right? Why not do both? I mean, why not? These are people that are trained, you know, I mean, have you ever been on a mental health call that you were the primary responder? And how did that work out? Like, did you feel unsafe? Did you feel like you couldn't control the situation?
Have I ever been
like a responder in a situation like that normally a police, like, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I'm a social worker, so I'm a person who's meeting with people all the time.
Like an emergency call.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So did you feel like you had the resources to handle that situation, either by yourself or with the police?
I mean, I think we're talking about situations that are super wildly, like, you know, we're talking about like everything from a child having a meltdown, right, and ripping things off the wall and breaking things in their house, to someone who had just been sexually assaulted, to somebody who is suicidal. Like, I mean, there's such a broad range. I mean,
broad range, and that's the problem.
Right.
Is that they have to deal with all of this, and it's a lot for them. I think they felt like, I don't know, I'm not a police officer, you know. It's not that I don't want to deal with this, and they certainly have the personal experiences to understand the complexities in any dynamic, you know. So I'm just wondering where the city is on this. If it's like, can we ratchet up this kind of training, even if it's not called CIT or SIT, and then what do we do about this co-responder, this care model? Because I think there's a big need. They sense that there is a big need out there. That's what they're telling me, these officers.
I think that the police department has looked at that in some way. That's why they have co-responders. These are social workers that make these trips with them. So they aren't having to carry the full burden of dealing with these situations. You have co-responders who ride out with them. My nephew was a co-responder with the sheriff's department early on. So he worked night shifts, and whenever the sheriff department got a call that indicated that he got in the car and rode out with them and assessed the situation on site and determined whether that person needed to be referred to a, some kind of recovery resource or whatever that term might be, to help. But you also have a lot of community ambassadors out there, people who are trained social workers and who are there to help identify these issues. I know I work with an awful lot of them at Garden Valley because we dealt with a lot of those issues. And because Garden Valley was also a site for interns in social work, a lot of people came through our building that began to develop an empathy for working with people in mental health crises. But I think there are a lot of resources out there. The issue is whether we know about them and whether we can readily, because there were officers who thought that they could still do certain kinds of things at St. Vincent, even though a lot of those services had closed and they were corrected. It was like a course correction to say, no, this is not what St. Vincent does anymore. And you had people there from St. Vincent, and that's what I meant about the strength of the training. You had actual practitioners there talking to us. It wasn't just somebody coming in. I think there are quite a few resources out there. The key is, do we know they're out there? And how can we have the people who come in contact, whether it's the co-responders, whether it's the officers, know where to send or where to take? Even the judge was amazing, talking about how he, when they get these cases, whether he's, I can't remember the term, whether he's sending them to diversion programs or not. Yeah.
I think the big thing is there's a lot of resources out there, but often when you're calling them, they're full. And so that is,
the team, as they say it, were always tight.
And that's the thing, is there's so many great community resources out there, but I know that I'm constantly calling, this respite provider, this group home, this homeless shelter, this, and even though all of these great resources exist, oftentimes when officers or other people in the field are trying to utilize them, they're at capacity.
Families, especially mothers with children, was always, they didn't have enough space for mothers with children.
Yeah.
We have actually taken some to Akron. We've paid bus fares for some in Cleveland to take them to an Akron center because all the spaces in Cleveland were full.
I will say one more note on kind of what Commissioner Long was saying about needing a multi-layered response, and I think that there is not enough right now, and because we're still seeing it, and I think that is where a care response program comes in, where that if just with the volume of calls that we're seeing that are crisis and mental health related and substance use related, if we can defer some of those out, then we would see a higher rate of calls that CIT officers are responding to, and then also would free up time, because some of the challenges with some of these calls, one of my jobs as a social worker is I am a diversion screener for a diversion program where kids are being charged with domestic violence. And some of these calls, officers end up having to be on them for 4 or 5 hours because, trying to find placement for the kids, they have to bring the kids from one location to another, right? There's all of this. It's not even just the volume of call, but some of these calls end up being very long, lengthy calls, and that's 5 hours that they're not on the road responding to other calls. So, and that is what our behavioral health work group is really looking at in some of those things. And so I would just, say that we do have a work group that has started and that people are really excited about. And so, we do have
add one other thing to that, and that is that there was, they expressed that there was difficulty with 24-hour referrals.
Yeah.
Because some of the sites would be closed at night when you need to be able to use them for referrals. So in identifying where some of the challenges were, definitely with teens, definitely with mothers with children, and also with those resources that may you can only access, at least
9
by
to 5.
phone or whatever, 9 to 5, and not from 5 through, 7 or 8 the next
Yeah.
morning. Those were some of the challenges that were identified.
For sure.
So I'm gonna go to Commissioner Rodriguez, and then I'm gonna go one more time to Commissioner Wong, and I kind of want to wrap this up because I want to move on with the agenda.
In a little while, we would have taught that whole class to you, so then you don't have to worry about it. But may I just say this?
Absolutely.
Maybe this is something that could be developed for people who really want to do it over a period of so many Saturdays.
Mhm.
Where they would come in and do it for the commission.
Separate from the police, yeah.
Yes.
Because those,
Yes.
I think most of those people would probably volunteer. They were very
Yes.
enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what was said is what I was going to state is that overall, especially in social work, we have this wraparound approach where we have calls for a specific client and we work with those different partners. I see this very similar with the police, right? So that allows them, and like you stated, to free up their time to focus on their different duties as well, to especially with a shortage. So I think overall it is to ensure that we have our approaches and not put everything on them, because the reality is that we're working in partnership. And even with the commission, there are some things that we have control over as well as the officers. So we cannot just put blame on one specific entity, but to identify issues as well as to see what partners we can bring in collaboration to ensure that it's, like you said, multi-leveled as well as cohesive.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was just thinking, outside the CIT, what we're not thinking, I understand there's resources and that could be, but there's one thing that the officers do need is that they know that they need to de-escalate that situation. And they understand when people under mental distress that they have to be even more nuanced, right? This is a person. So I think that type of de-escalation training, focus on that might be helpful. You could do that separately because that's the only way they can convince someone, trust me. So there were just little things that I never studied this, but there was one scenario that the officer came in and the woman was sitting down and he was standing up and speaking to her. And I just said, well, maybe you should, because there's another officer, there's a table, maybe you should sit down. And he had never thought about that. And the person that was training said, that's one thing I forgot too. Meet them at eye level. So do these little things, and they're very eager to learn. So just kind of body language things, and then communication. If you can develop a module for that, I think that would help with because the other things we can't really control, right? Who is at capacity, all those things. But they would just love to be able to have the confidence to handle those situations. And that comes from experience, but they don't. If they don't, they're probably getting to the situation with the most heightened situation. I mean, that would even challenge a experienced social worker. So you can imagine a person in that situation. Because I think their scenario, and Commissioner Benito is right, they're trained to do other things. Their primary goal is to see if somebody has broken the law. It is not, their posturing is not to be in that mode of the intense empathy needed to calm a situation like that. They did know never to say calm down. They all have probably field experience that is not the best way.
Or probably in their personal lives, they also realize that. You said LaTanya had a question.
Yeah, I think it's for the people that attended for Commissioner Wong and Co-Chair Ridgeway. She wants to know about the dispatch. I know this is something that we have not completely figured out, which is sort of what role does this committee and this commission play when it comes to dispatching, because dispatching, as you said, is involved in everything when these calls come in. And so I think that's an area we haven't had clarity on yet. But what she wants to know is will the dispatchers also, did they talk about dispatchers also being trained in the CIT? And it's to help them to ensure that the right officers actually respond to the calls.
So Carol Ballard, who runs the CIT program for the county and for the city, also runs a dispatch CIT training. It's not the same. It's not 40 hours, but they do go. There is a dispatch CIT training.
And then I just wanted to listen to the discussion. I was thinking from getting LaTanya couldn't be here, so she's communicating with me. But it sounds like you kind of like, as you all were talking, you kind of got around to some of the stuff that she's been emailing. Like she wants to know about how do we feel about a non-police response, and she also thinks that the MRAC collaboration is a good idea. And I was just thinking about when we were as I was thinking about our framework, and I definitely agree with the multi-layered response. I'm just trying to figure out, I think we need to figure out as a commission and as this committee, what can we do in those areas? I was just thinking about, like, I know Commissioner Wonga had an idea at a previous meeting. I was thinking about the grants, but like, if we see that this is like a need, like it'd be a good idea to maybe set aside a certain amount of funds from like the grant program to say, hey, we want people that are going to help us in this CIT area, right? I mean, I just trying to figure out, I think that's a discussion we need to have about what is within our authority and what could we actually do to help this issue. Because as you said, I mean, I agree, like, I think volunteering is best, but 36% still seems kind of low. I just want us as this committee to begin to think about ways that, like, we have our resources, and like, how do we then, like, deploy our resources to maybe add some additional layer of assistance. I think that Latanya's idea about us thinking about a non-police response, because is a good idea, because when we were going through the grants, you could see the possibility for some work like this to be done through organizations or grassroots people.
Right.
So I just would like for us to maybe, we don't have to decide today, but I would like for us as a commission to think about how do we then use our resources, because this seems like this is a critical area.
So just very briefly, I think the thing you're talking about is that, and also there's an article.
If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try.
There was an article in the New York Times. It was okay. It was so a block in Brownsville, which is a very challenging, distressed neighborhood. Every month, I think in April, the community answers every single call except for like imminently like murder. Like they even like answer the domestic violence calls.
Right.
And they were successfully able to de-escalate everything. So it was like 45,000 calls, I think, over 5 years. And I thought that was like a very interesting experiment. But then someone told me that at the Noble conference, they met a person that in Detroit, they're doing it. So what I was thinking, because I discussed it with Ms. Syed, is that why don't we put out actually not all of the grants, but an RFP of something that we see from all of our work that can be done and deployed in the community. And something like this it could be a test, because I think that was the thing I also got from the safety committee, because they were like, $50,000 is nothing. That's what they were saying. But like, you want to do it all across the city, it seems like you're spreading the money out. So if we can have these pilot programs that we can learn from that are more focused, like a block, and they've been very successful. So that was.
Yeah, I just also want to point out that we do have a work group that is working on this, and I, want like we, so
Yeah,
like
we can give it to you.
Yes, yeah, but I think the thing too is that there are groups. There's a coalition of people working to try to bring, care response, which is. There's a lot of different models, and, they've been traveling to other cities to look at, different models that are being used, and whether there's some where they use community volunteers, and there's some where they only use licensed practitioners, or some where they use peer support specialists, right? Like, so there's a lot of different, but, we're definitely not alone in that work, and I think it's great for us to tap into the people that are, that have been, fighting for that.
Let me say one last comment. I guess the last comment I would make is that Carabella did say this, so that even though Memphis is the home for CIT, Cleveland far surpasses where Memphis is. Even though we are not where we ought to be, we're a lot further than Memphis is, even though they basically were the creators of CIT training. I thought that was encouraging. So that means they're putting effort into it. And I think Co-Chair Adams, you're right. Chair, I'm looking at this Co-Chair talking to you. But Chair Adams, I think it's important to know what it is that we need before we began to develop what it is, what it looks like. And I think the more it'd be great to hear how the dispatch training goes, because that's a lot of it, how they ask the questions to get the right people there, rather than just get police there, or whether that police needs to go with the co-responder or whatever. But I do think that I like the idea of beginning to look at other options and other ways that we can address this. But I would just say, on a cautious note, let's make sure we understand what needs to be done in order to know what we can do. Yeah.
I need to go.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. Thank you. Bye, audience.
But that was informative. It went a little longer than I anticipated, but I think it was useful, and I also think one of the things that I kind of took away and I jotted down is I do think that as we move forward with this committee, I do think that it would be worth looking at that de-escalation training. I mean, I think it sounds like there's if that is something that they seem to be that they're working on, and if it seems like it's something that is critical and important to making sure that these situations are dealt with properly, I think we should probably look into that as a committee just to see if there's any areas that we can assist on. So I'll reach out to Commander Magooth and kind of let him know, have a discussion with him about that and see what we can kind of do, what we can just examine for that. I was going to say I guess the next item.
Did we want to do public comment just at the end?
Yeah, I'm going to
Okay,
say this.
just at the end.
What I wanted to do really quickly is just provide like an update. I don't know if Commissioner Donaldson's still there, but he's on the phone, so I think I can step in.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Are you okay with me doing the update for the scenario training, or do you want to do it?
Yeah, that's fine. I can add to it if something, if I need to. My call dropped earlier, but that's why I called back in.
Okay.
But I'm still here.
Well, since you're already there, do you want to just go and then I can just, since you're like the leader of that work group, do you want to just go ahead and then I can always fill in anything that, it's your group. So if you're okay with that, I would want you to just go ahead.
Yeah. So, and again, if I cut off, it's because I'm in the back row of Mississippi. So we had a meeting last week, and we talked about the agenda items. We talked about the logistics of the event. It was determined that the event will be held on December the 16th. We are trying to finalize the start time. We talked about an earlier start time, but then we felt that it would be better to maybe start a little bit later in the morning. So we're thinking maybe the 9:30 to 2:30 p.m. time frame. So right now, what we're going to do is, now that the location has been confirmed, we're going to have the police department do a walkthrough just to make sure that the location will fit their needs for the scenario training. We're targeting at least 75 community members because we're going to break them up into 3 groups of 25. And we are going to start the marketing portion of this as well. So once we have the objectives finalized, then we can start marketing it. What we're going to need help with, I think primarily, is going to be just getting the word out, because we know that emails and flyers don't always get to the right people. So we're really going to have to rely on commissioners and community members to just help us promote this event. We are planning on potentially having a second event, but we're going to use what we've learned from the first event to just determine how the second event should be structured. We initially thought maybe having one event on the east side and then one on the west side would be, the correct way to do this. But it is a scenario-based event. So what's going to happen is the police department will present 3 different scenarios to community members based on youth support. And they would just be able to kind of see what the officers go through when they're training youth support scenarios. We're also going to have a panel discussion where we will allow community members to fit in questions beforehand, and we will also allow community members to ask questions on the spot if they have any questions And one of the ideas we discussed was to have the panel discussion after the scenarios, versus having the panel discussion before. That way, if you're going through a scenario as a community member, if you think about a question, or something might pop up that you would like to be answered during the panel discussion. And then we also talked about the panel discussion being more of a lunch and learn, and that will allow us to serve the community members lunch and kind of just talk over, the lunch, and which will then allow us to start later and end a little earlier in the afternoon. I think that is pretty much it. But like I said, the main thing right now is just going to be finalizing the walkthrough with the police department, and then handling logistics as far as food, budget, if there are any supplies we need for that day. But it's pretty much on track. It's just a matter of crossing the T's, dotting the I's.
Do we have a location yet?
The East Professional Center. East Professional Center on 79th and Superior. It's where the CMND is, like their east side, like administrator building.
Can you tell me the date?
December 16th.
Saturday, December 16th. So I think, thank you, Commissioner Donaldson. I think he pretty much covered everything. I think right now we have pretty much a solid plan, and I think like Commissioner Donaldson said, we're literally just filling in like logistics, like food and things like that. But we're on track to have this event. We're excited. We think it might be the first of its kind. And so we are happy that we have been able to work with the police. It's been a good working relationship with them, with Lieutenant Smith and Commander Magooth. And so this is going to be our first event, our blueprint. And the goal is that we'll start with 75. And then as we kind of like, work out some of the kinks, we hope that it'll grow. Like the police wanted it to be bigger. I was like, no, we just maybe get it like 75 first, then we'll see, and then we can. But they're really ready to like open this up to like more people in the community. So, Commissioner, Reaves.
So I know it says there's one on the east side and one on the west side. Is it on the same day and they'll happen simultaneously, or they're two different dates?
So what'll happen is we'll do this first one on the east side, and then we'll literally replicate it at another location on the west side. So then we do like these types of community trainings. We want to make sure that like there's one on both sides of town. So it'll be the same training, but it'll be done 2 separate times. Coach Gregory?
I just want to remind us that this is one of the areas that we have been asked by the independent monitors to do. So this will help upon completion. It'd be great to be able to report this back out in March as meeting one of the consent decree mandates.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm just really excited about this event. And, I think that this is an area that the CDP has put in a lot of work to really create really high quality trainings that are reality based and immersive. And so I'm really excited for us to be able to, be able to showcase this, and also for us to learn and to go through it ourselves. I think one thing that I would love for us to kind of think through is kind of a plan for if any community members become escalated. I just think that going through reality-based scenarios could be triggering for people, and especially when talking about use of force, right? And so, I think that one thing that I would really like to make sure is that, we think through a plan for if anyone becomes, triggered or escalated, that, we, I just would hate for this event to turn into something where there's, a negative response, and also where I don't want the police also to have to, remove somebody if, so I just would like for us to kind of think through what are some things that we can do to make sure that there's resources there for if anybody becomes escalated or needs someone to talk to.
Yeah, so think of those risk management practices is what I'm hearing.
And that's something that we did discuss that at the meeting. So I brought that up. So thank you for mentioning that, and we did discuss that. So there will be a plan.
I just want to give a kudos to the committee as well as Ms. Williams for working on the project. So I'm excited to see it, and I know that it will be informative for the community as well as help with our mandates. So kudos.
And I just want to the last shout I want to give out to is to the police, because a lot of this is them. They have to bring the people to do the scenario. So the officers had, to agree for themselves to like come to this event and on a Saturday, right? And it's going to be December 16th in Cleveland. And so, yes, I really wanted to thank them for that because, we came up with the idea and proposed it to them, and then they're really making it happen. So I just want to just let people know, I know it's gonna say Cleveland Police Commission on the the advertising or things
In
like
partnership,
that. Yeah,
in partnership with
This
CPD.
is really a true partnership with the CPD, CDP.
Great
So
for
I-
building relationships with the CPC as well as residents. So
Yep. So I just wanted to just say that because, that's really where a lot of this day, literally we were we want to do this. And then he met with Charles and they met with Charles and James. And then they met with me and we were this is what we want to do. And then they literally came back with this and made it happen. So I wanted to say that. So thank you, Commissioner Donaldson and Commissioner Chura, who's not here today, but they've really been behind the scenes making this happen. And I also wanted to just, remind us that we do have a community member on the work group as well, Latanya Goldsby. And I think that her input was really valuable too, because part of the reason why she's on the work group is because she's going to make sure that we're doing things with the community in mind. I think she really brought that just that insight and that perspective to the work group. So I want to thank her as well. The next item agenda would be a quick one. So we did get a new needs assessment from the from Commander Magoo. And so all I wanted to do with the committee members is just clarify, are we okay with how we've been giving feedback? Do we want to just continue that, or do we want to make any type of change?
So meaning that we all review it and then send it to you and then have you compile it and forward it? Is that what you
how
mean?
we kind of just had the document, we had a working
I
document.
thought that was great
everybody
when
just-
we made a Google or a SharePoint doc. Yeah, I think that was good.
Are you okay with that, Donaldson?
Yeah, I agree. That was
Okay.
great process.
I thought so as well. So I'm thinking, do you all think, so we need some type of timeline. The document looks like it's about 40 pages. Do we think do we need a couple weeks?
Did they say when they need it back by?
They always want it as soon as possible. So
Yeah.
whenever we can get it back, they'll take it. What do you think would be a reasonable time? This is the holiday season. We're going to be in NACO next week. Do we want to just maybe shoot for next month's meeting?
Yeah, I think that makes
Because
sense.
we're going to be at
Then we
NACO,
can
it's going to be
discuss it.
Thanksgiving.
Then we could discuss it at next month's meeting before we send it.
Actually sounds like a better plan. Yep. Does that sound good to you, Donaldson?
Yes, it does.
And then basically what we can do is, depending on, because we will be at that point where I think either, and we'll have a discussion about next week's meeting, because we got to remember that we also are going to have this community event. So that's kind of like a meeting. It's like another event for us. So we'll talk and we'll figure out when we'll meet. Go ahead, Co-Chair Ridgway.
Oh, I was just gonna add, Chair, that you may find some things at NACO.
Yeah.
In some of the sessions there that you may want
Right.
to, include in whatever you decide you want to do.
Right.
Because there's quite a bit there in terms of oversight, of police. There's, some of these same areas that are in consent decrees, not just here, but across the country.
Yeah.
So there may be some knowledge coming out of that conference that would be valuable as well.
And then, with that plan, then we could also incorporate, what we learned from NACO.
I mean, I think we can talk about it, but my feeling is that maybe we will do the event next month, and then we might just not meet again until after the new year. It's the holiday season.
Yeah, so I would ask them if this is time sensitive, and
Yeah.
I would ask them, because
Yeah.
the last thing we want is the CPC is holding up anything
Not get the
right,
document back. I'll
and blame it
follow.
on.
Yeah, I'll follow.
I wouldn't say that we shouldn't wait until the new year. I mean, but I think that I mean, if we wait until next month's meeting, that's giving us 4 weeks to go through it. I mean, even if we,
But it might be okay for January, but I would just ask to make
Yeah.
sure, and I think that would help facilitate that conversation.
Yeah.
Because this may not be time sensitive, and it may be okay in January, but you won't know until you have that
Right.
conversation, right?
Oh.
yeah.
I'm gonna follow up.
Right, because it is the holiday, right?
Yeah. I guess my sense is like, let's look at it and keep
Yeah.
it moving, but
And we can always do work when we're not meeting. Like we can still, so
Mhm. I would do both, but just to be on the same side.
Right. okay, that sounds good. I'll follow up with Magoo about if this is time sensitive or not, and then we'll just move on, proceed from there. But I think we're moving along just fine. And then I guess the last thing that I had on the agenda, and like I said, I don't want to. The goal is not to make this decision now, but I do think one of the things about the framework is it's like a working document, it's a live document, and so we're gonna always kind of be making adjustments to it. I just wanted to open up the discussion to the committee with the co-chairs here, in light of the meeting that was just had with the monitoring team, like the monitoring team's report. And so I know that the last time that I met with Jason, we had did the use of force. We have prioritized use of force, and I think bias-free policing, and then focusing on these community events. But I'm wondering, I feel like there's like a search and seizure whisperer in my ear, and I'm wondering, while the co-chairs are here, is that because what the plan is that we were going to focus on the bias-free policing really heavy in the early part of 2024, and then maybe the plan is to come back around to search and seizure maybe at the second half of the year. Is that time frame going to work, or you feel like that's going to be? Because I know policy's working on search and seizure stuff, so I just want to make sure that the work that we're doing is going to be helping what we need to, for compliance on the report.
Yeah, one of the things here that we have been talking about, we began the discussion at our last leadership meeting, was to actually for the leadership team to kind of dissect that consent decree and look at the expectations of this commission or for this commission, and then we kind of help to prioritize what work needs to be done by when, while keeping in mind the frameworks that have already been developed by the individual police committees. So I think some of that work will be reflected. That we can pass on to the various committees to look at as well and help determine priorities.
And I think overall we work as a unit. So if their policy is working on search and seizure, that helps to move the work and our mandates forward. So your committee doesn't have to fully focus on everything and do it by yourself. We work as a unit. So overall, at this quick moment, I think that.
Okay. I just want to just put that out there because so we work as a unit, and then we're always getting new information, and we're trying to we're trying to see a non-compliant. It's right. So okay, so we'll just keep what we have, and we'll move from the use of force because I feel like that's going to keep going anyway, and then we'll move on to the bias-free policing next. So I think that if there's I guess I'll say, is there any new business, any other additional business? And if there is not any other new business, then I'm going to open. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just one quick question. So are we keeping our regularly scheduled meeting for December then?
I feel like we should, because it'll give us one more time to meet. Even if it's just really brief, it'll just give us the time okay, check this for the event, check this for the event. It doesn't have to be a long meeting, but I feel like it's perfectly situated, literally almost a week before the event.
Yeah. Well, so the event's on the 16th right now. Our regularly scheduled meeting is on the 13th.
Perfect.
So it's a couple days before. So I think that sounds good to me.
All right. Anything else?
I do have a question about that, though. I think at one point the co-chairs were thinking of having a full meeting earlier in the year. Is that still the plan? Because that would fall on the 13th.
I'm going to bring that up.
It is scheduled for the 13th.
It is December 13th. Our full commission meeting.
Yeah, the 13th.
Oh, yeah, so then I think we should, I mean, it probably wouldn't be a bad thing to move the training committee meeting back a week so that then there's a full week between our meeting and the event in case we need to do
So
anything.
do we want to try to shoot for the 6th? Like we
Okay.
did before?
So on the 6th is the scheduled rules committee meeting, from 6 to 8. I don't know if we haven't met in a while, so I don't know.
Or it can be after you just do a reflection on the event and prepare for your next event.
Yeah.
Because you can always call the committee members, Chura and Donaldson, and be in constant communication.
Well, Charles, you're leading this group, you and Chura. What do you think? As a person who's like, connecting all the dots for this, do you feel like we should meet before? Do you want to do after? Like, how would you feel best going into on that Saturday?
Yeah, I think we could probably have a work group meeting at some point. We can just figure that out.
Okay.
I can figure the date out and what works for everyone. But I do think we should have a work group meeting.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll figure it out, and then we'll communicate everything out to everybody. All right, thank you. All right, so I think with that said, we can open up. I know we have Lou, and Lou has something to say, but I would like to open up for public comment. Do you have a mic, or she? I guess you
Yeah, this one.
And thank you for this effort to make this important event happen. I believe this is something very different, but will have a real impact on people. In the past meeting, I actually made an exaggerated example saying we should use the real incidents we already had to show what the current officers would do to react to the same situation. Of course, that was an exaggeration. However, to have a training realistically resembles the daily situations people may encounter. That's important. And this is the reason why I think it's good that we will have like a quiet space or some kind of peace room for the community members who really reacts to the training scenarios strongly, to have a space they can vent, they will have somebody to talk to. So I wish we will make sure that particular part, it's not just a room for people to drink water. We wish we can have somebody professional there to talk to them. I know this may increase the difficulty, but since we will not just have this event once, I think we should have this like every year, every 6 months. And I think we better start thinking about this part. The space will have a water, maybe coffee, tea, a little bit snack, also the professional people there to talk to them. And also, this is an important time we can actually get input from these people. Yes, you may think they are overreacting at the moment, but through their real lived experience, we actually can learn lots of things to improve the next time when we do the same event.
I want to respond to that because I didn't mention it, but that's one of the things that we're also going to do. We're going to have like comment boxes all around. And so the idea is that people will be able to submit questions. They'll be able to submit like their feedback. And I think Jason had a really good idea of perhaps producing like a pamphlet or something like that. And we wanted that information that the people are telling us what they want from the training or what they like or what is missing. And then we want to use that feedback from those comments and everything to basically produce, that report or that pamphlet. But that is actually something that we were talking about and planning to do as well.
Having also a way people attending the event, they can write down their thoughts. That's also good. But you also have to know that not all community members will do their thinking process will be exactly the same. This is the reason why I emphasize the part that we should have a professional, psychological, having good knowledge on the psychological part of it, to talk to these people, to also get a feedback. Lots of people, they are good at a verbal expression, but some other people may good at written expression. So having both to collect input, that will be a really good, important thing to do. The other thing is, I would like to comment on something both Commander Wang, Commissioner Wang, and Commissioner Benito both mentioned. In reality, yes, police will respond all the calls 24 hours. However, due to funding issues, not all the social service agency, actually majority of the social service agency cannot be on 24 hours. So if there is no places in the late night, weekends, for officers to refer people to get assistance immediately, that actually creates a negative impact on the police officers and the community member. Doesn't matter, it's the one actually in the incident at the moment, having the case right now, having in this call, or loved ones, or even just later some other people hear about this incident. The reason why is when you don't have things happening in the way like you can see immediate result, majority of people by human nature, they feel frustrated. They do not have a positive reinforcement in their mind to motivate them to do the same thing or even better the next time. This is the reason why we also trying to find out if there's any way eventually we can make a recommendation to some other authorities telling them that when they start funding all these agencies, they should also consider the proposal if this social service agency wants to open night hours. Maybe this agency would not be able to get funding to do 24/7, but you want the community to understand if right now people can get a third shift job, you can also have a night care center. You can also have a social service agency open only during the night, on the weekends. In that case, that also helps the police officer who already got some training to get a real practice. Some of the officers working night shift, since they are used to the situation, no places to refer anyway, so they become slack on this area. Not intentionally, it's just because the daily situation will condition them that way. So they would not think about the escalation, then doing referral. They cannot connect dots like that. So if someday later, all of a sudden, this officer has to put on a day shift, this officer would not have a habit to perform that way, like the daytime officers they have been used to. So to ensure all the officers can get all the benefits from all these trainings, we also need to encourage the community, even all the funding sources as governmental source or private sector source, to let them realize they should also encourage people to start having all these services just during the night and weekends. That will really help us out to make our steps to go towards fulfill the responsibility and obligation for consent decree will be better too. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou.
And thank you for the comment. And with that, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Bye, Charles.
Thanks.
Bye, Charles.
All right.
Those are some good suggestions, Lou.